Good morning, Thomas MacLaren School. It is Thursday, April 1st. Welcome to springtime. I want to introduce you today. I'd like to introduce you to one of my favorite artists of all times, Faith Ringgold. Now, the reason I am in great admiration for her personhood, not her art is beautiful, expressive, courageous, radical in many ways, honest beyond measure. But what I really admire about her is who is her personhood. When I was in college, I learned about the Harlem Renaissance and found it to be one of the most fascinating times in artistic culture and American history. An explosion of creativity across all mediums, from music to art, writing, performance, sculpture. Just an explosive time in American history and cultural development and enhancement and autonomy of African American people. Faith Ringgold was born in the midst of the Harlem Renaissance. She was born Faith Willie Jones. Her parents were Andrew Lewis and Willie Posey Jones. Her date of birth is October 8th, 1930. She is 91 years young. She was born in Harlem, which is a borough or a section, an area of Manhattan, the island of Manhattan, as a part of New York City, New York. Little history about Harlem. In 1658, Peter Stuyvesant, Dutch governor of the New Netherlands, established a settlement called Nieuw Haarlem, named after Haarlem in the Netherlands. It became a district of New York City and occupies a large part of northern Manhattan. As a neighborhood, it has no true fixed boundaries. It may generally be said to lie between 155th Street to the north and here to 96th Street to the east, 110th and Central Parkway to the north and west, and Amsterdam to the south. During the Harlem Renaissance, Faith Ringgold's childhood home in Harlem was a thriving part of the artistic scene, where such figures such as composer Duke Ellington, author Langston Hughes, and her childhood friend Sonny Rollins, who would grow up to be a prominent jazz musician, often visited her family home and played at parties. Because of her chronic asthma, Faith was encouraged to explore visual arts as a major pastime through the support of her mother, often experimenting with crayons as a young girl. She also learned to sew and work creatively with fabric from her mom. Ringgold maintains that despite her upbringing in the Great Depression era, Harlem, this did not mean she was poor or oppressed. She was protected from oppression and surrounded by loving family, she says. With all these influences combined, Ringgold's future artwork was greatly affected by people, poetry, music, as she experienced it in her childhood, as well as racism, sexism, and segregation, which she dealt with every day of her life. In the 1950s, due to pressure from her family, Faith enrolled in City College of New York to major in art, but was forced to major in art education instead, as City College only allowed women to be enrolled in certain majors. That same year, she studied with artist Robert Gwanthame and was introduced to printmaker Robert Blackburn, with whom she would collaborate on a series of prints 30 years later. In 1955, Ringgold received her bachelor's degree from City College and soon afterward taught in the New York City public school system. In 1959, she received her master's degree from City College and left with her mother on her first trip to Europe. While traveling abroad in Paris, Florence, and Rome, Ringgold visited many museums, including the Louvre. This museum is a particular inspiration for her future series of quilt paintings known as the French Collection. In 1962, she married Burdett Ringgold on May 19th. In 1972, Ringgold traveled to Europe with her daughters and visited friends in Spain. Ringgold continued on and visited Germany and the Netherlands. In Amsterdam, she visited the Rijksmuseum, which became one of the most influential experiences affecting her mature work and subsequently leading to the development of quilt paintings. In the museum, Ringgold encountered a collection of 14th and 15th century Nepali paintings, which you see on the left, as well as, which inspired her. In the museum, Ringgold encountered a collection of 14th and 15th century Nepali paintings, which inspired her to produce fabric borders around her own work. Ringgold visited West Africa once in 1976 and again in 1977. These travels would deeply influence her mask making, doll painting, and sculptures. Ringgold is credited with the invention, or better yet, the creation of the story quilt. She also wrote children's books. Her best known being is called Tar Beach, and is a prolific painter, sculptor, and an activist. Her quilts reflect the human story, specifically the Black American story. Ringgold stated she switched from painting to fabric to get away from the association of painting with Western and European traditions. Similarly, the use of her quilt allowed her the advocation of the feminist movement, as she could simply roll up her quilts and take them to a gallery. This is another perspective of the quilt, and this is also a photograph of Ringgold working with her mother, who was a professional seamstress, on the quilt itself. When she returned to the United States, a new painting series was born. In these works, Ringgold took the perspective of an African-American woman captured and sold into slavery. Her mother, pictured here, Willie Posey, collaborated with her on this project, as Posey was, as previously mentioned, a popular clothing designer and seamstress during the 1950s in Harlem. She taught Faith how to quilt in the African-American tradition. The collaboration led to this, their first quilt, Echoes of Harlem, in 1980. The collaboration led to Ringgold's first quilt, Echoes of Harlem, completed in 1980. In '87, Ringgold accepted a teaching position in the Visual Arts Department at the University of California in San Diego. She continued to teach until 2002, when she finally retired. In 1985, Ringgold published her first autobiography titled "We Flew Over the Bridge." The book is a memoir detailing her journey as an artist and the life events from her childhood in Harlem and Sugar Hill, her marriages and children, to her professional career and accomplishments as an artist. 2 years later, she received honorary doctorate degree, one in education from Wheelock College in Boston, and the second in philosophy from Malloy College in New York. She has received over 80 awards and honors and over 23 honorary doctorates. She has 18 publications, first one being Tar Beach, 1991, and the most recent, What Will You Do for Peace? Impact of 9/11 on New York City's Youth, published in 2004. Ringgold resides with her husband, Burdette Birdie Ringgold, who she married in 1962, in a home in New Jersey, where she has lived and maintained a steady studio practice since 1992. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a great day.